Okay, so let's get into this deep dive. We're looking at the whole legal storm around the Algerian author Kamel Daoud and his novel Houris.
Right. It's quite something.
We've got various news reports here talking about international arrest warrants from Algeria, and then there's this separate legal thing happening in France.
A parallel track, basically.
Exactly. So our mission really is to try and, cut through the noise a bit, understand what the allegations actually are, how Daoud is defending himself, and, well, what this all means. For writers, sure, but also just for that line between real life and stories.
And it's worth remembering, Houris won the Goncourt Prize. That was just last year, 2024.
Yeah, a huge deal. So this isn't some minor book we're discussing. It's significant.
Yeah.
And like you said, two fronts. Criminal case in Algeria, civil case in France.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how one novel can spark these major international legal and, frankly, political waves.
Definitely. A Goncourt winner facing this. It really shows the power and maybe the danger of storytelling. Okay, so let's start with Algeria. 2 international arrest warrants out for Kamel Daoud. One came in March 2025, the other just now, May. Confirmed by the French Foreign Ministry, actually.
Right, May 7th. And they came from a judge in Oran, Algeria.
Oran, so grounded in a specific place. And these warrants, they didn't just appear. They're linked to complaints filed back in November 2024, also in Oran.
Correct. 2 separate complaints.
So what are they about? Let's break down the first one.
Okay, the first one is, well, deeply personal. It's from a woman named Saada Arbain. She's alleging that Daoud and his wife, Aïssa Dado, who's a psychiatrist, really crossed a line.
How so?
She's in violation of medical confidentiality and unauthorized use of her personal story in the novel, Houris.
Wow. And the key thing here?
The key thing is that Arbain was apparently a patient of Daoud's wife between 2015 and 2023.
Okay, that definitely complicates things. That raises some, serious ethical questions right away.
Absolutely. Using patient experiences, even as inspiration. It's tricky territory.
And Arbain's own background story is incredibly harrowing. She's a survivor, right, from that massacre in Tiret in 93.
Yes, she was only 6 years old, and she claims very specific, very sensitive details from her life ended up in the book. Things like her tracheostomy tube, particular scars, even tattoos. She says they mirror the character Ob.
So not just vague similarities, identifiable markers.
That's her claim, used without her consent. You can imagine how seeing your own trauma reflected like that, publicly, without control.
Yeah, deeply distressing. But that's not the only legal issue in Algeria for Daoud.
No, it's not. There's a second complaint. This one's from the National Organization of Victims of Terrorism.
Okay, so a different angle here. Not individual privacy.
Right. Their focus is more on, let's say, national narrative. They allege Daoud violated Algeria's 2005 National Reconciliation Law.
Ah, that law. We need to understand that, don't we? It relates to the Civil War period.
Exactly. The war ran from roughly 1992 to 2002. Huge loss of life, maybe 200,000 people. The law came afterwards, trying to, heal the nation, move forward.
And part of that involved controlling the narrative, essentially.
Sort of.
Yeah.
It puts restrictions on publications about that time. Anything seen as potentially harmful to Algeria's image or its institutions, well, it's prohibited.
And there are real consequences.
Oh, yes. The penalty can be 3 to 5 years in prison. So this organization believes Houris crosses that line, that its portrayal of the war is damaging in the way the law forbids.
Okay, so 2 serious complaints in Algeria. But then there's France. Saada Arbain is also taking action there.
That's right. She's not limiting this to Algeria. She's suing both Kamel Daoud and his French publisher Gallimard in the French courts.
And the charges there?
Invasion of privacy and defamation. Different legal grounds, but stemming from the same core issue to the alleged use of her story.
Is she seeking damages?
She is. 200,000 euros. It's a substantial amount.
And the timing. You mentioned the French Foreign Ministry confirmed the second warrant today, May 7th. Is something happening with the French case today, too?
It is, actually. A procedural hearing for the French civil case is scheduled for today in Paris.
Wow. Okay, maybe not a coincidence then. It really highlights how these 2 fronts are connected, doesn't it?
It certainly seems that way. It ties them together very neatly, date-wise.
What are Arbain's lawyers saying about the French case? Anything stand out?
Well, her lawyers, William Borden and Lily Ravon, they've described the case as exceptional in judicial history.
Exceptional. That's quite a statement.
It is. It suggests they think this could really set a precedent, for how the law treats real-life inspiration in fiction, especially when trauma is involved. They're likely highlighting that direct link, she alleges.
And didn't Daoud himself say something about his inspiration? I remember reading an interview.
Yes, back in September 2024, in Lobes. He did admit knowing a woman with a tracheostomy tube who inspired the story. He didn't name Arbein, but...
But her lawyers will definitely seize on that, I imagine.
You'd have to assume so. It seems to confirm a link, at least in principle.
So, how are Daoud and his side pushing back against all this? His lawyer must be active.
Oh, very much so. Jacqueline Lafont, his lawyer, is arguing forcefully that the Algerian warrants are politically motivated.
The political angle.
Yeah, she sees it as part of a campaign to silence him, pointing to his past criticisms of the Algerian government.
And she's planning to fight the warrants.
Yes, she mentioned challenging them via Interpol's File Control Commission, trying to get them invalidated internationally.
Okay. And what about Daoud himself? What's his public stance been?
He spoke about it on France Inter Radio back in December 2024. He basically argued that Arbein's story was, quote, public knowledge in Algeria.
Public. That's an interesting choice of word.
It is. And he stressed that Houris is fiction, inspired by the Civil War context, not a biography of any one person. He's defending his creative freedom as a novelist.
And the publisher, Gallimard, they must be involved, being sued in France.
They are, and they're firmly backing Daoud. They've put out statements calling the accusations violent defamatory campaigns.
Strong words.
Very. They believe these campaigns are orchestrated by media linked to the Algerian regime. They also point out that Houris is banned in Algeria.
Right, banned. And they were excluded from the Algiers book fair, too.
Yes, last November. They see all this as evidence of a coordinated political attack, not genuine legal complaints.
And Antoine Gallimard, the head of the publishing house.
He also weighed in. He emphasized that even though the book draws on history, the plot, the characters, they're purely fictional. That's their core defense line. It's literature imagination.
You can't really separate this from the wider political climate, can you? The relationship between France and Algeria.
No, you really can't. That's a crucial backdrop. Relations have been strained. For instance, France supporting Morocco's plan for Western Sahara last July. Algeria strongly opposed that.
So there's existing tension.
Definitely. And that probably colors how this whole affair is viewed and maybe even handled on both sides.
And Daoud's own political stances within Algeria, speaking out about Boulam Sansal, another writer.
Right, Sansal was imprisoned in Algeria in November 24. Daoud publicly supported him, and he's generally critical of the Algerian government. So, yeah, that fuels the perception that maybe this is a targeted campaign.
It's interesting seeing the public reaction, too, on social media, like X.
Oh, it's completely divided. You've got people praising Daoud's courage, his literary merit. Then you have others who are absolutely condemning what they see as exploiting Arbein's trauma for fiction.
A real ethical debate playing out in public.
Exactly. It touches a nerve about where the lines are, or should be.
And the official French reaction. Beyond confirming the warrants, what are they saying?
The Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Christophe Lemoyne, called Daoud a, quote, respected and recognized author. He stressed France's commitment to freedom of expression.
So, signaling support, essentially.
It seems that way. They've said they're monitoring the situation closely, given he's facing legal action in both countries. There's a level of diplomatic attention there.
It really comes back to that core tension, doesn't it? Artistic freedom versus privacy rights?
Absolutely. And the post-colonial context, the specific history of Algeria, just makes it even more complex.
Because freedom of expression isn't absolute, right? Especially when actual harm is alleged.
Precisely. Legal experts point that out. It's always a balancing act. And in a place like Algeria, with the sensitivities around the Civil War and reconciliation, that balance is maybe even harder to strike.
This case feels like it could really matter going forward. Set precedents?
It could. For how authors, publishers, and maybe even courts navigate using real-life stories, especially in politically charged settings.
It might make writers more cautious, or maybe change how they approach anonymizing sources.
Potentially. Or, it might discourage tackling certain topics altogether, especially where free speech is already under pressure.
Which connects back to those wider concerns about free speech in Algeria, like the Sansal case you mentioned. French politicians seem concerned too.
Yeah, figures like Edouard Philippe, Marine Le Pen, quite different ends of the spectrum have voiced support for Daoud and Sansal. It signals a broad concern in France about the situation for writers there.
So the literary world is watching very closely.
Intently. It's pretty unprecedented, really. A Goncourt winner facing international warrants and lawsuits like this. It's a major judicial and political tangle.
Okay, let's just quickly run through the key details again, just to make sure everyone following along has the main points clear in their head.
Sure, good idea. So, the arrest warrants.
2 of them, from an Iran judge, issued via Interpol Algeria in March and May 2025.
Right, and the Algerian complaints that led to them.
2 main ones. Saada Arbain alleging invasion of privacy and breach of medical confidentiality, and the National Organization of Victims of Terrorism alleging violation of that 2005 reconciliation law.
Got it. Then the French lawsuit.
That's Arbain again, suing Daoud and Gallimard for invasion of privacy and defamation, seeking €200,000. And that procedural hearing was set for today, May 7th.
And the core allegations against Daoud.
Essentially, using Arbain's specific traumatic story without consent, potentially gained through his wife's therapy sessions and breaking rules about discussing the Civil War.
And the defense.
Daoud and Gallimard are saying it's fiction creative license. They claim Arbain's story was public anyway, and they strongly suggest the Algerian actions are politically motivated persecution.
Okay, that covers the main factual points.
And just hitting those key questions you might have. Why the Algerian warrants?
It boils down to those 2 complaints. Unauthorized use of Arbain's story and violating the reconciliation law about the Civil War narrative.
What's Arbain's central claim?
Breach of privacy and medical confidentiality, that her therapy disclosed story was used for the main character without her permission.
France's response.
Monitoring closely, calling Daoud respected, and emphasizing freedom of expression, a kind of cautious support.
And the broader implications we've been discussing.
Huge questions about artistic freedom versus privacy, especially in sensitive contexts. The France-Algeria relationship is a factor. Restrictions on historical narratives, and potential legal precedents for authors everywhere.
It's definitely a complex situation. This whole deep dive shows this clash. Art, privacy, national laws, history, all tangled up.
Especially with Algeria's civil war and the France-Algeria relationship layered on top, it's incredibly sensitive ground.
And it really leaves you thinking, doesn't it, about that tightrope author's walk, drawing from real life, especially from vulnerable people or traumatic events.
It does. How do we balance that? The need for artistic freedom, for stories to be told, against the responsibility to protect people's actual stories, their memories, both individual and collective.
That's the big question this whole case forces us to grapple with. A lot to think about there.